Hey, History 503 class. I'm sitting here in Houston. My street is a river. The water's lapping over the street curb right now. Um, it's terrible being in the middle of a slow motion disaster. I know Ahmed in the class has his fiance here and his family here. I hope they're doing okay. This is bad. I wanted to talk briefly in this podcast about the syllabus for the course and what to expect for the course. This course is called History and Methods. We actually used to teach one semester of history theory, and then we would teach one semester of history methods. But folks thought that that was just a little bit too much, and so now we've kind of jammed it into one semester. And what the way I'm going to run this course is from now, beginning with the first week's reading until about October 24th or 30th, something like that, we'll mostly be talking about historical interpretation. That's the trickiest part of graduate school. We really focus in graduate school on interpretation, how historians have built analytic models to think about the past. That's really what makes you considered a significant historian. The way of thinking about the facts that you collect. I think most people that think about history, although people don't think about history that much, well, maybe these days they do with the Confederate Monument controversy and all the distortions about history. It's kind of interesting. I look forward to talking with you guys about that. But they think that history is just this accumulation of facts. That if you had 20 historians and the 20 historians were given the same data, that they would come up with the same books. That's not true at all. Really, what interpretation is, what partially it is it's a question of emphasis. What do you emphasize? What do you de emphasize? That's a huge part of being a historian. And in the first week's reading, the Gordon Reed's classic book on Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings, you'll see when it comes to de-emphasis that white historians valorized the words, the historical record of Southern whites, and often ignored the words of African Americans. So interpretation is really the key to graduate studies. We know you guys can gather up facts. You've got those skills, and we're going to go over that at the end of the semester. We'll have a big section on that, gathering information. But the first thing that we want to hit you with is this idea of creating analytic models. How do you think about the past? Um, and what we're trying to do is to get you to be more sophisticated readers of your history text. What are the arguments that the historian is offering? Now, there are a bunch of places you can find those arguments. You can often find the argument in a text, in the title, rather. Sometimes a good title will have an argument. I actually always read the back blurb of a history book to orient myself. As probably many of you know, one place to find argument, a good place, is in an introduction. What maybe some of you all don't know is that an introduction is the last thing usually the historian writes when the book is done, because in some ways you don't really know what you're saying until you've said it. So one of the things that as you read your history books, when you read the introductions, realize that that's often the last thing that the historian has written. And publishers really press you in your introduction to say, what's the main point of this? Why is this significant? There's a saying among historians, it's the so what question. And the so what question is, why is this important? What are you saying new about this topic that no other historian has said before? Um, and so the so what question, the question of interpretation, is hugely, hugely important. It's really central to graduate studies. It's kind of a higher form of critical thinking. I think what you're going to find in your courses is you're not going to be force fed a lot of facts, although you'll learn facts. But what we're really going to force feed you is interpretation. We figure you can learn the facts on your own, but its interpretation is really the key. Now, the thing is, interpretation is, I think, harder than it seems. It took me almost a year. I went to New York University. It took me about a year to figure out what my professors were talking about when they talked about interpretation. I actually can remember looking at a footnote once and going, oh my gosh, this is what they're talking about. They're talking about how this guy thinks. It was a guy named Clifford Geertz, an anthropologist. They're looking about how Geertz, the model, the analytic model, the interpretive model that he's putting his information in. So what you're doing when you look at interpretation, you're speaking English, but it's a specialized form of English. Every profession has its language, right? Plumbers have their language, auto mechanics, doctors. Doesn't really matter. Everybody's got their language. Well, historians have their language too. And I think you'll be pretty amazed by the spring semester that when you start talking the language of historians. And one of the keys is if you start saying Smith says or Gordon Reed says or Gallagher says or Kelly says or Guy says or Ing says, this is kind of the way you should be thinking. You should be thinking in terms of argument. Now, Gordon Reed's argument is very straightforward, but you're also going to read some excerpts from Sally Hemings. I'm not Sally Hemings. I'm sorry, Harriet Jacobs. Incidents in the life of a slave girl. Well, Jacobs isn't a historian. She doesn't care about interpretation. So one of the things I want to make clear is that when we read primary documents, historians, we bring our interpretation to their words. So I think one of the advantages about reading what we call a monograph, Gordon Reed's great monograph, by the way, she's from Conroe, Texas, just north of Houston, and Jacobs, which is primary evidence. I think what's nice, plus there's 2 weeks before, between September 4th, the first day of class, and when I see you again, I think it's good to read a monograph and also to read primary evidence. That's one of the things that we're going to talk about. What's the difference? Remember, historians select primary evidence, pieces of primary evidence, to make the argument that they want to make. Okay, that's one of the key differences. So to go back to the course in general, the first part of the course is about historical interpretation, historical argument. The second part is going to be much more nuts and bolts method. You're going to end up writing a detailed annotated bibliography on a topic of your choice towards the end of the semester, where I'm going to ask you to research a topic and discuss both the primary and secondary sources that deal with that topic. You're not going to write a paper, but you're going to get to the point where you could write a paper. We're going to meet with Sherry Salisbury towards, I think it's October 24th or 30th, something like that. So the last 6 weeks of the course are the more method part of the course. The first part of the course is the more historical interpretation part of the course.